Welcome to Crushing Doubt. I'm here as always with my co-host, Julie Conrad. Julie, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm energized for another show. We are back. We have an exciting guest. All guests are exciting. That makes it sound like some of them weren't. That's a horrible thing to say. You've all been great. But today we have Byron Jackson. He's the older brother of NFL great DeSean Jackson, and Byron was quite an athlete himself, and you'll get to hear more about him soon. But one of the things that Byron and I bonded about is kids. Now, Julie, you do know, I think, that I taught elementary school for 2 years in Compton.
Right.
I was Teach for America right after I graduated college. And it was quite an experience. It has really, it was one of the major influences on me in terms of how to think about how I wanted to raise my own kids, actually. My wife sometimes gets mad at me because she's like, why do the kids listen to you so well? And I'm like, I did Teach for America. You got to give me, credit for this. That's how I learned it. But there is a way that I learned to relate to kids, and I wanted to talk about it in relation to doubt, because this is the part of the show where we talk about doubt in various forms. Mm-hmm. Of course, doubt comes in so many forms, but one of the forms it comes in is when we're kids. Kids, very naturally, have tons of doubt, and they, if you think about it, how could it be otherwise? They're learning things like how to speak, how to walk. They're looking around and there's these giant people who seem to know what they're doing. So we come from doubt. It's very natural to have these doubts. And I've said this many times, this show is not about just having no doubt. You have to have your doubts first and then work with the logic and the science to get to a better place with it. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is how we parent, and I'm not trying to lecture anybody on how to parent.
Oh no.
Yeah, don't worry. That's not going to happen, at least not for a couple minutes. Once I get going, who knows? But one of the things I have wanted to do with my kids is to do the opposite of children should be seen and not heard. Our generation, I think, is doing it better. I think our parents' generation did it better than the one before with that. But one thing that I think really is the case is that people are recognizing that. Do you remember there was that show, Kids Are People Too?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't even know if that was a national show. Was that like here? We're both in Cleveland, so I'm like, I don't know. Anyways, there was a show, Kids Are People Too, and they would have kids on doing all kinds of amazing things. But this is the garden variety version of that, where it's just like kids are amazing anyway. Mm-hmm. And I really love to listen to them and show them that we can listen to them and hear what doubts they have and help to foster better confidence. Is this ring true for you, Julie? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think of it a little bit differently. I think about the curiosity, because looking at my kids, I kind of look at what they're going through and experiencing it. I have 3 girls, 3 different age levels. So, the curiosity of being a child and the curiosity, I didn't see so much doubt as I saw just
well, that's because you were doing a good job. I'm not kidding.
Just a skepticism, maybe a couple of, instances, but mostly it's a inquisitive, curiosity of what it is that they should be doing, what they are doing. But then you get into, junior high, you get into high school.
Yeah, I was going to say, aren't they comparing themselves to other people?
They're trying to figure out who they are. And that to me it becomes more of a self-doubt than anything else. Self-esteem definitely comes from doubt.
But that's actually that's what I mean. Maybe I didn't frame this very well right from the start. I mean self-doubt. I mean that the people that I see, they have doubts about their symptoms, about their bodies, about what's true. But that all comes originally from self-doubt. So
see, I look at it like as a child, as a young child, there isn't even really that sense of self. It's just, I'm a person in the world and I'm just figuring it out. And then there's this identity that we start to form. And then I see that interplay start to come in where, the brain is changing. We're taking in all this social stuff. And then we start to formulate that self-consciousness that then perpetuates a fear, an anxiety, a doubt. And then it becomes less of, oh, I'm curious about who I am, to, oh my God, who am I? And I see that with my kids, is that figuring out and wanting to just know who they are. And my daughter just told me last night that she's like, gosh, I made all these choices for my classes this year and I have changed so much, and then there comes that doubt of, maybe I should have taken that class. Maybe I should have chosen this path. And for her, it ends up becoming this fear of missing out, which is a whole other thing.
Oh, yeah. FOMO. I don't even know if people still use that term. It's like a relatively new term for me. Although I think about it, sometimes new terms are like, no, actually, that's like 8 years old. But but I do think that you're hitting the nail on the head. It's the doubt that people really carry around with them is, who are they? Mm-hmm. And when I work with people, that's a lot of what they come in with. And their bodies, one of the things I love about working with mind-body stuff is the body knows much more about who we are than we do a lot of the time. It's, there's that book, The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk. And it's like a part of us knows, but a part of us doesn't. And we're always trying to figure out that riddle. So I was thinking about somebody like Drew Barrymore, people who had an identity either thrust on them or a situation where they formed an identity early. And then, to my knowledge, and this is just from my observation, she had to go through a period where she could find a way to get comfortable with herself. Same is true with Andre Agassi is another one that comes to mind. He has this great book. It's called Open, which is a great name for it too. And that's part of the play on words that it is. It's about, the tennis opens, but also being open. Mm-hmm. He was, I think, 17 years old when he won Wimbledon the first time. And then he had to reinvent himself. And there was even the physical change of, he started losing his hair and he was horrified by this. And then he shaved his head. And it's like, there was something so symbolic about it where he was just like, I'm not going to hide who I am anymore. Mm-hmm. It's a great book, by the way. Anybody out there who wants to read a really great book.
But even all these young actors that you listen to any biography or interviews with them, and the one theme that I always notice is that they know that there is now as an adult that a whole part of their life was skipped over and missed because they were thrust into an adult world where they were, going to adult parties and, experiencing all of these things that were way inappropriate for a child of that age. But their peers around them were, much older. And there's a sadness that you hear as they reflect on not having the things that, their friends had at that age.
And obviously this is an extreme version of all of this. I want to talk more about the kind of regular experience that kids sometimes have, though, where they know certain things. Mm-hmm. But adults, my oldest daughter, she's like a born 40-year-old. She, and she's always complaining, like, people don't take me seriously. Like, they're always like, I'm just a kid, so they won't listen to me. And she's saying these things that have tremendous wisdom to them. Mm-hmm. And
don't you think they're like our teachers? I look at my girls and I'm like, they are teaching us, just as much as we're trying to teach them, I think, if we pay attention.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and also just experientially how they change us just from being there and being who they are. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things I want to think about as we go forward with the show is how we can foster people's connection with their bodies, how we can foster their belief in themselves. And I really do think that as parents, we want to think about starting that early, helping
Absolutely.
kids.
That's, you hit that right on the head. I think that's exactly the place you got to start.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to both of my girls if they're saying, "Oh, my elbow hurts or my knee hurts," and I usually say, "Well, what's bothering you?" I'm not trying to like hammer this home every time. If they hit their knee on a like table corner, I'm not like, "What kind of emotional feeling are you having?" But I'm feeling that I'm mad at this table. But I think that I do like to teach them about this, but I also like to teach them that they can be powerful, that they can be listened
they can
to.
self-soothe too, right? We try to teach them that when they're in their crib, right? Is, give them the pacifier, give them something to self-soothe. But I do a similar thing, but I use
You self-soothe
practices.
in the crib?
Yes, of course. But I use aromatherapy. I have different scents that they use to stimulate different calming practices. They've experimented with meditation, with yoga. I'm trying to give them all the different options so that they can grab what works for them. Just what works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for them, but they need to know some of the practices that are out there for self-soothing.
Absolutely, and there's exposure, but you're also talking about something else. I'm going to wrap up on this, but you're talking about respecting that they are a separate person. There's so many times where parents often make the mistakes that they make because they get scared that they're not doing something.
Yes.
And I think what we need to do is trust our kids. Trust that they can find their way, because that conveys a belief that they have in themselves. Otherwise, you are building doubt.
Right. 100%.
I hit the nail on the head again.
Got it.
Oh my God, I'm on.
I'd be curious to hear what our listeners have to say about this, because it is a very interesting topic, and a lot of us, read a lot of books and listen to a lot of things trying to do the right thing. But I'd love to know if anyone is doing this, like you're explaining it, and they're letting their kids kind of have the chance to experience these things in their own way, and how they handle that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I do to try to get it right, I'll put in quotes because it's not really getting it right, is I ask my kids. I ask them what they need. If they don't know, that's fine, but I like to give them a chance. And so this is a good lead-in to our interview, because Byron Jackson works with older kids, but he works with athletes, and he tries to help them get in the right mindset for working towards being a good person. Not just being a good athlete, but being a good person. And that's for them. He's building them up. So I really look forward to this interview. Byron is a great guy, and I'm going to talk with him up next. I am sitting with Byron Jackson. He is a former NFL player and the older brother of DeSean Jackson, also a known NFL star. And Byron, you used to play for the Kansas City Chiefs, if I'm not mistaken. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I was with the Chiefs for two training camps. And,
all right, now listen.
And through the season on a developmental squad.
But you've been around football your whole life. You're still around football. And we're going to talk a lot about that kind of stuff. But you're a filmmaker, you're a writer, and I have discovered that you're also basically a philosopher. It's really cool, and I can't wait to talk to you about all the things that you think about these things and bring that to our audience. So I think you know what this podcast is about. We have people on, we're usually talking about chronic pain, but we're also talking about the hope that people can have for things. And when you and I connected, we connected on a number of levels. And it just seemed like a great fit to have you on. Hear your not only your inspiring story of you, but also how you inspire other people. So can you start by telling me about your growing up? Where you're from LA. Are you from South Central? Do I have that right?
Well, actually, I'm from Washington, D.C. I actually was born in Pittsburgh, and I was raised right outside of Washington, D.C. in Landover, Maryland. And I grew up there as a young kid. And then right
I was
after
born in Maryland too. That's so weird.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So, but right after high school, the day I graduated, my dad put me in a car and drove me 3,000 miles to Hollywood, to California. So,
Wow. So I didn't even realize that. You grew up in Washington.
yeah, I grew
Got
up
it.
in Washington. I grew up right outside of Washington, D.C. and played football late. I didn't start playing football until 11th grade. Played for 2 years in high school, and then my dad wanted me to, encouraged me to continue. So he brought me to California the same year DeSean was born, and kind of
Wow.
guided me to go to a junior college, and that was kind of like his plan to get me to go to a junior college and try to earn a scholarship.
So now tell me about you showed me the footage of number 10 DeSean Jackson, The Making of a Father's Dream. Tell us about this footage and this film, how you thought of it, how it came to be.
Well, like I said, my dad brought me to Hollywood, California. He lived right up under the Hollywood sign, and that was the same year DeSean was born. And I fell in love with Hollywood. It was like directors living next door to us and actors and stuff like that. And, and just the beauty of California, I started picking up cameras and just started filming. Hollywood, I started filming, DeSean as a little kid. And at the same time, my dad was like, you came out here to play football. So I was training. I trained for 2 seasons before I even went to junior college. Went to Irvine, and I was training with a track coach to work on my speed. And, I finally decided to go to junior college and walked on to Santa Monica's program and knew I wanted to study television and film. So, at the time I was like, I'm going to play football and do what my dad really wants me to do. And at the same time, I'm going to pursue, a passion that I have is, being a filmmaker. I wanted to, that was during a time when, Spike Lee had, School Days out, not Boys in the Hood, but Do the Right Thing. So I was really inspired by Spike Lee. So I was like, I'm going to be a filmmaker, but football's going to pave the way.
And so your dad had this dream of you getting to the NFL. Is that
Yeah,
was that a big
definitely.
part of growing up?
No, that was definitely a big part of growing up. I didn't live with my father, but from afar, he used to send me letters telling me, think NFL. I'm like, Dad, I'm small, He's like,
Oh, so
Lynn
he was in L.A.
Yeah,
was in L.A. the whole
he
time.
was in L.A.
Oh,
Yeah,
got it.
he had moved to L.A. from Pittsburgh, and he was in L.A. starting a new family and everything. But he always sent me letters saying, "Think NFL." As I'm growing up in Washington D.C., he said, "Think NFL." Lynn Swan, small. Our whole family's from Pittsburgh, so he's like, "Lynn Swan, small," and if you work hard and stuff like that. So after high school, he said, "I'm gonna bring you to California." He brought me to California, and that's the same year DeSean was born. So I'm like 18 years older than DeSean. So he started kind of guiding me to, work hard and train and, walk on to Santa Monica College. He was very, very encouraging. I mean, I think, and I say this all the time, if anybody wanted a father and they wanted to pursue sports, our dad was like the ideal father. Yeah.
And how so? Tell me more.
So after I decided to go to Santa Monica College and walked on, I played for 2 seasons, and my dad was there at every game. He had made friends with the coaching staff. He had actually Herman Edwards was there recruiting another defensive back, and my dad had sparked up a relationship with Herman Edwards. He was such a people person. He had sparked up a conversation with Herman Edwards. Said, "Look at my son. He's over on the scout team." Herman Edwards was like, "Wow, he's pretty good." So the next season, I got offered a scholarship to San Jose State, and I got offered a scholarship to several different schools: TCU, San Jose State, Memphis State, and a few other schools. And I really was serious about filmmaking, so I looked at their film programs and seeing what program offered what as far as like being either a filmmaker or a television major, and San Jose offered a great program, and I decided to go to San Jose. Another story, Tommy Smith, when I ran track at Santa Monica, he was he was a female track coach, and he went to San Jose State. So just getting encouraged by him, I decided to go to San Jose State, and I got to pursue football at a Division I school, and they played some big Division I schools. So it was a great chance to get a lot of exposure in football, and I was living my dream, quiet kept, as a filmmaker.
Yeah, and sounds like this is part of what I talk about in this podcast also, is how do we stay true to ourselves? It's amazing because you knew what you wanted to do from a pretty early age. I was pretty sure I'd probably end up being a therapist, but really right. I've gravitated more towards other things as well and filled out the parts of what I wanted to be. So I ended up staying very true to me too. And this is what brings us together, right. you and me, we both stayed true to ourselves, and boom, here we are. It's pretty cool. No, and I'm honored to have you here.
No, I appreciate, since I've gotten to know you and talking with, DeSean's podcast, and, seeing where your mindset is and what you're about it's a great opportunity for, me to have a platform to talk about, sports rhythms and just the whole mindset and all of our experiences from, behind this camera, and to kind of show, a little bit about, like I said, the program that we've developed, and, how we want to, share it with the world, because I think, it's a gift that God put a camera in my hand and I was able to capture so many moments, and to be able to share it in a way to try to, encourage people to become better people is like, like I said, it's a gift. And, to have platforms like yours is like, incredible.
And it's great, especially because what you're bringing really fits with my platform. What I'm bringing fits with your platform. So tell the audience about sports rhythms. What's the idea behind it? Well, when did you come up with it?
Yeah. Well, I think sports rhythms is a little bit of, I think, a lot of things, but, it's like experiences over 25 years of working in sports journalism from UPN 13 to Channel 13 to, Fox Sports to, NFL Network, and just an experience from an athlete being behind, the lens and knowing the mindset of a player, and then knowing what, how to report it from a journalistic point of view, and just, taking those experiences of actually reaching the NFL and helping develop other, players, and my brother get to the NFL, and trying to, take all of that combined experiences into a program to help guide kids to become better people, because we know what it's, like to build a great football player. And if we could take those same intangibles to help, build a great person, then I think we all win. And that's kind of like the philosophy behind sports rhythms.
Yeah, you were saying to me when we talked the other day that if people put in the practice time being a good person, mm-hmm. that they put into other things, think of what kind of society we would have. And I just love that. One of the things I talk to people about is putting in that time with themselves to be a good person, even to themselves. But we know that when they're bringing good stuff to themselves and other people, good things start to happen. And one of the things I've been so impressed by with you and with DeSean is your attitude towards life is this one of curiosity and excitement. When we watch DeSean do these interviews, he's genuinely curious. And my executive producer, Greg, who you're friends with from a long time ago, which is how we kind of got linked up.
Right.
We've all talked about the fact that you had a big role in DeSean's life. I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I think that is true. He's curious, but I think we're all curious. It's just finding ways to kind of spark that curiosity. And I think one thing, being 18 years older and going through my career and being able to look back, it kind of gave DeSean kind of like, not just me, all of the people around me, it kind of gave him a perspective from, 18 years before. So I think, I like to give him a lot of credit, because he had a lot of perspective coming at him, and he was able to kind of seize them all and define who he is. And I think that's part of his brand, Define One. He's very unique, and, he's very genuine, and he likes to take all of that knowledge that he got and pass it on. And I think that's a trait that came from my father. He had a lot of knowledge, he had a lot of passion and desire, and but he wanted to give it. He wanted to give it to any kid he saw that didn't have opportunities. He wanted to do that. And I think sometimes it could be a curse too. So it's about, balancing, that type of, passion and drive. And I think that's what all sports rhythms and, when we bring our camps to, different communities, that's what we try to teach kids is the balance between, having a passion for football, but at the same time, understanding, you got to do the right things around the house to be able to play football.
I don't know if this is true or not, but with what I know about your story so far, it seems like your experience with DeSean was also formative for you in terms of seeing how you could influence younger people. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, without a doubt. But, not just DeSean, it's 7, all of us, brothers and sisters, and just all of them, just
the whole family.
Being around each other, I think we have a great influence on each other, and, just being able to seize all of that. And I think I say it's a little unfair because, they had a crazy brother that filmed everything. So I was able to kind of analyze everything and kind of take it and put it into, I call it a practice. So, it's a good practice. So it's unfair, but it's actually fair because we're trying to, give it away and try to.
Yeah. And I also think in a lot of ways they got lucky that the filmmaker had the vision that he had. Your vision is a kind vision, and it's about building people up. That I could deal being filmed every day under. There are people who could film a lot with a whole different way of thinking, and that would be problematic. So I saw, the footage you sent it to me, and towards the beginning, there's a scene where I think it's you and DeSean. He must be like, I don't know, 8 or 9 or something like that, and he's running around and he's got that swagger. He's telling you can't catch him. He'll run way too fast. And but it's the combination of that confidence and that talent with the good person.
Yeah, no.
And I just love that you helped him sync that up.
Yeah, no, it took a lot of trust, on both parts. It took trust on his part. It took trust on everybody around because, it can be very annoying having a camera in your face. And, a lot of times, everything shouldn't be captured, you know what I mean? So it's like I said, it's a balance, knowing when not to film, knowing when to film, and knowing if you're starting to offend somebody or if you're starting to, get a little disrespectful. So you got to really, balance that out. And I think the camera actually helped shape who I am, and as far as like my desire is to capture everything, but at the same time, you got to have a balance, and everything is not to be captured. Some things are meant to be maybe remembered or written down, because there's all forms of ways of sharing information to try to help people become better, as like I'm sure your practice, and I can't wait to hear more about the patients that you've been healing. And I have a mom that's dealing with some back issues that I always like DeSean's trying to grow every day. I'm trying to grow to try to help people close and dear to me. Also
send her my way. I'm ready.
Yeah, no,
I'm sure she's gonna be watching this, so I'm ready for you. But I I was thinking about another bond that we have. So I spent some time in LA. Mm-hmm. I was only there for 2 years, and it was right after I graduated from college, and I went into this program, Teach for America, which is it's actually kind of a controversial program because it takes kids who have come from a fair amount of privilege usually, and sends them to communities that really need teachers. Right. So I ended up teaching in Compton for 2 years. But I have to put this disclaimer on it. When people think about Compton, they think about Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer and the Coolio song. And I've been to Compton High, so I spent a lot of time in Compton. But I was on the southwestern edge. I would dip in and dip out, and I was teaching 3rd grade. I got the cushiest Compton assignment you could get. It's just luck of the draw, but it wasn't cushy for the people who were living there anyway. So I still got to see that side of life, and I always thought that I was I thought I would work with kids for sure. I was always good with kids. I was a camp counselor for a long time. I make kids laugh all the time, and I thought, okay, well, maybe teaching elementary school is the way to go. But I also I had trauma in my background, my own personal experiences, and I always actually feel more at home with people who understand suffering.
Right. So
in a way, Compton felt very comfortable to me in this very strange way.
Wow.
And I'm just, when you go ahead, what were you going to say?
No, I was just about to say, sometimes it's like perspective. Me growing up in, DC area and hearing all the stories about LA, and I go see Compton and I'm like, it's not, it's almost like television paints a picture. And if you, buy into that perspective, you'll be scared to do anything in life,
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I knew this was to be true, but when I showed up, there's great people there. I feel like I have like a little Compton family. I'm not in great touch with them, but actually you and I talked about how can I get in touch with these kids? They were 9 years old when I was teaching them. I was 24, so they're now 31 years old.
Wow.
And I want to go back and see what happened to those kids. I found a couple of them, and I knew that some of them were not going to end up in good situations. One of them passed away, I had heard about, and she was one of the best students in the class.
Wow.
Her name's Erin Logan, Erin Logan. She, 2 N's in Erin, and she just was the sweetest girl. And I heard this from another student, Genovia Weaver, who she actually went to college, and that is very rare for kids in that area. I think I told you this the other day. Compton High at the time started out with, I think it was 1,600 kids starting the freshman class. Only 800 were left by the end of that first year, and it just halved until there were 200 graduating seniors.
Wow.
And then 35 took the SATs.
Wow.
So you're a filmmaker, and when we talked, I was like, oh, I think there's some good synergy here, because I want to go out there, and we'll talk about it, and we'll see if we can make this happen. But I wanted to impact kids, and you have a way of impacting kids that is your own way. And I wondered if you could talk more about, you have a program that's developing with USC.
Yeah.
Can you, and this is Sports Rhythms, right?
Yeah, this is Sports Rhythms, Play for Life. Play for Life is a non-profit side of Sports Rhythms, but it's incorporating the same principles, the same, philosophy. And it's really a unique program at USC, but just, touching back on, your Compton and your whole project behind that, I commend you on that. Just you're like a light that touches these kids, and it's, that's what I kind of sometimes look at, like all the kids over the years, and just wondering what happened to them and where they might be in life, and what type of impact that you did have for them. How many years were you guys together?
Well, I was only with, I had 2 classes, so I had about 40 kids total. There were 20 kids in the class, but I remember all their names. I have all their papers with me. There's hilarious stories from these.
Really?
These kids were just so full of life and so fun.
Wow.
I remember there was one story. My kids love this story, but there was a kid named Frank Bradshaw. And at the end of the school year, I had a list that was like, my favorite science project was this, my favorite math day was this. And Frank Bradshaw, who was usually in a very good mood, he was in a really bad mood that day. And so he wrote on the paper, every answer was nothing. He was like, my favorite math project was nothing. My favorite writing project was nothing. And then he got to science, and he was like, my favorite science project was volcano. Frank, he was like, I don't care how bad a mood I'm in.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I wonder where these kids are. There's another Frank in the class, Frank Miller. I kind of want to like say all their names so they know that I've been thinking about them all this time. And I was only a 24-year-old kid myself.
Wow.
But it's kind of like with you, where you started giving back at such a young age. And I do, I hope I had good influence on them. It's hard for me to know.
Right.
But I had two classrooms, and the first year it was hard. I was not a good teacher. I was a good person, but I was young, and I wasn't that good of a teacher. The second year, at least, I was a decent teacher as well as being a good person.
Right.
But tell us about the Prince. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
No, I was about to say that's what that's what teachers, it needs to be more teachers that give that type of, whether it's the first day is your best, but just giving your all to those kids, you know, regardless of what happened. I think something positive came out of them. It's almost like you just got to believe that something positive came out of them, because your same type of giving has to come out in some area of their life, you know?
I believe it. They have to see it. They have to see it to know that it's there.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise they don't.
Yeah.
So similar along these lines, tell me about the principles of sports rhythms and play for life.
The principles are 5 principles that organically came, I mean, through the documentary. If you watch the documentary, there was a scene when DeSean was, I think he was like 9 or 10 years old, and we were at the ocean, and me and my dad hadn't spoken in almost 2 years. It got ugly, misunderstandings, and our dad had a lot of passion, and we stopped speaking for 2 years. And this day we started to speak again, and we came together. It was his birthday, and we were on the beach, and he picked up this rock, and the rock, he kissed it up to God, said, we're all going to kiss this rock up to God for luck and just for prosperity. And we did it, and it kind of been like a symbolic rock. And then at the end of the documentary, when our dad got sick and he developed pancreatic cancer, on the way to the hospital visiting him, I picked up these 5 rocks, and I left one of the rocks with him, and it was the Believe rock. They had 5 affirmations on. I left on the Believe rock. Just want him to kind of, you know, have strength and believe, and kind of give him the same encouragement that he gave us growing up. And, you know, he passed away 4 months later, and, you know, I'm sitting here with all these hours of footage and, you know, how to organize it. I took 8 months. I was working at Fox Sports at the time. I took a leave of absence for 8 months, and I dedicated my life to logging every minute of almost 1,000 hours of footage. And as I started the process of logging them, these rocks were just lined up. Believe was first. I was just trying to kind of organize my thoughts and organize the story. And I started thinking about our dad's, his life, and, you know, his desire for sports. He loved sports as a kid, and it got suppressed. And so I like desire his first rock. And then, you know, he moved to California from Pittsburgh, driving buses. He moved to LA. He he drove tour buses around Hollywood, and he started dreaming, what if I gave my son the support that I didn't have for sports? That's where the dream rock started taking place. And then from dream, he started like sending me letters saying, think NFL. Like Lynn Swan was small, and he started putting a vision in my head. And I said, you know what? Maybe I need to go out for my high school football team. 11th grade is not too late. My dad always believed it's never too late if you believe something. So vision became that next pillar. And then after vision, I had belief in myself. I came to LA. He lived up in the Hollywood Hills. I had the belief to train every single day. I drove down to UC Irvine, trained with a very good track coach, Danny Williams, trained me every day for like 2 years. Got my 40 time. Believe it or not, I was running a 4.6 out of high school. Got my 40 down to a 4.4. And then when I got to college, I trained with another trainer. We'll get into that. Gary Gablin and his family got to a 4.27. But anyway, that's a whole nother story.
What?
But that's where the belief that's where the belief started taking shape, and that's where I started lining up the outline of the documentary, Believe. Okay. And then power, this rock power, I'm like, how can power be power, he gave me all the tools to take this power and to get to the NFL. And then when I got to the NFL, I realized, do I really want it, or do I want it for my father? And I started realizing I want to be a filmmaker. I want to get into Hollywood. And that's where we went our separate ways for a time, and I kind of got to know myself a little bit better. And that's kind of how I developed my 5. We call them our five disciplines, because if you don't have discipline, nothing. A principle isn't anything.
That's amazing. So I didn't realize this, but the 5 principles, I don't know if I have this right, but it sounds like it came out of your father's death. That experience, looking back after. Do I have that right, or did I miss that?
I mean, you have it pinpoint. I mean, sometimes, and it's weird because I call it a journey. Everybody's on their own journey, but throughout this journey for myself, it started helping me understand like a lot of things as far as life, death, life, and the purpose of all of them, and mistakes and non-mistakes. It helps you understand how to learn from your mistakes. And it's funny because you could study a million different books, but the deeper you get, it's really a simple practice, and it's so simple. And that's why I believe sports is a great language where it can cross all types of different lines that doesn't matter what color, doesn't matter what religion, doesn't matter what political affiliation. If you have the same work ethic as this guy, you guys and can work together, you guys are gonna win. That's something that you can't argue about.
That's beautiful. Now, when was this? How many years ago that your father passed away?
My father passed away in 2009. So it's
interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did we talk about my father passing away when I was a baby?
We talked a little bit about it. We talked about your dad passed away when you was really young, and we didn't really get into
it was also cancer.
Wow.
And well, here's the thing though. Even though I was a baby, that event, it made me think about things in a way that's kind of similar to how you were thinking about things.
Yeah.
You had other things that I'm sure made you think about things in a certain way, but those 5 principles, I feel like I've been working on the same thing. And when you talk about those principles, it's a very, very similar thing. I mean, on this show, one thing I talk about, I have these 3 different columns, so I don't have 5, but I have 3, and maybe they encompass them all.
Uh-huh.
One is about knowing yourself and your emotions, and so that has the dream in it. What was the first one again?
The first one is desire.
Desire and dreaming is all about knowing your emotional life.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the third one was
vision. And the way I remember, the way I kind of learn them and remember them, it's like when you really want something, you'll dream about it. But if you don't have control over that dream, it could go anywhere. But I say dream with your eyes open. So if you want something, you dream with your eyes open and get the right guidance, then you're living your dream happily. But if you dream with your eyes closed and you don't know where you're going, you could bump your head and you can have a lot of misery. So try to dream with your eyes open and try to dream with the right guidance. So it's good to seek the right guidance. And sometimes you get the wrong guidance, but it's never too late as long as you have your breath to come back and get realigned. And it's crazy. I could talk all day long about it, but it's kind of how my practice goes. As soon as we hit the field, we go through subconsciously, but every once in a while, I'll consciously remind kids. But we go through the principles, and then we leave, and we all happy, and we kind of feel good. And it's like every day, if you could take this practice into your everyday life, just like football teams, every day you could get better. Every day of life, you can get better.
I have the same thing because I'm helping people get rid of symptoms, but what I'm really doing is helping them find the way to live that feels good, and belief is another part. This show is called Crushing Doubt. It has the double meaning. It has the fact that we struggle with doubt so much it can be crushing, but it also is about if you can believe at a strong level, you can get somewhere. And I use science and logic to get people there, but they need the space to doubt, and they need the space to come to believe. And then the vision and power thing. My third column is called Power. It's actually called Power. And the vision is part of it, because it's like you can't be powerful if you're not going to enact it in some way. Yeah. And so you have to you first have to dream it.
Yeah.
Then you have to believe it. Then you have to bring your power in, and then you have to do it. And so I just have been blown away. It's one of those weird things in life where we met, and it just feels right.
But it's funny, like these encounters. It's funny because personally, I've been reading about it and seeing people talk about it, and now they're starting to happen to me. And it's kind of like literally 2 months ago, I would be jumping up for joy. But it's like, okay, this is what I've been. This is kind of when people kind of are on that path, it kind of like comes out. It's almost like when you score a touchdown, the guy that spikes the ball and celebrates and does all of this, and he gets a penalty and thrown out the game. It's like the guy who hands the ball, like they've been there before, and it's like understanding that. Once you start understanding it, it's like, and that's like what you're doing. I think when you make a breakthrough with a patient, it's kind of like it's like a rewarding feeling.
It's huge, and I love to be with people who are being themselves and really inhabiting who they are. That's what I feel when I'm with you. Right. And I think that's how we came together. And I've really seen that more and more. The more that I'm myself, the more I find the people, I don't want to sound too mystical about it, but it feels like I'm supposed to find them. You know, right. This feels right. And Byron, I really want to thank you for coming on. We could talk for hours and hours, and I want to have you on again. I want to have you on again. And I want to explore all this stuff about that you're bringing to the world. I love your positive belief, and you believe some things like me that some other people don't think. Like you think that we can address gang violence and things like that by really instilling hope and not getting overrun by the doubts we have. Really, so such a great. I'm so glad I met you.
I'm so happy. You know what I'm happy for? I'm happy for you and DeSean. You guys' relationship and that trust. After that first conversation, it gave me chills because it's almost like cool. how me and you connect. It's almost like you and DeSean, y'all connected the same way, and it's really special. You know what I mean? And you can't really. It's like sometimes I write down a lot of words and I say a lot of words, but sometimes you don't need words. You just need that. That is what you're trying to bottle up. That right there. And who can give it a words? I could say sports rhythms all day long. We could say this or that all day long, but that doesn't even give it justice.
Yeah, in the end, I think it's about unleashing who we are, being proud of who we are, feeling comfortable with who we are, and finding the people who love that person. Right. And you're in my in crowd now, Byron. I appreciate it.
Man, thank you. I appreciate, you giving me this platform. I thank you, and let's keep doing it.
It's my pleasure having you, Byron. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Byron, man, that's somebody I could sit down with for a really long time. There's some humans that you just connect with the second you meet him. He's just a really cool guy. Yeah.
No, and you probably got a sense of it in the interview. It's like we could have just gone on for hours. And the funny thing is, Byron says to me, he said this a bunch, that when he's talking to DeSean or whoever else, they're all like, "Oh man, you got a lot to say," and they like, but I'm just like, keep going. Like we really, it's pretty amazing how we just are on the same wavelength about a lot of things. Talking about very different things in some ways, but
he has such a gentle approach, very gentle. that there's no rush to get out what he wants to say. It's there, it's natural, it's coming from such a place of love, and I just love that. So thank you, Byron.
He's a very fast runner, but he does not, when it comes to conversation, he takes his time. He's really there with you. Yes. It's such a great feeling. So he's a great lead-in for the next setup that we have. We have been talking about my different columns, and we talked about the emotions column 2 episodes ago. We talked about the doubt column the last episode. This time we're going to talk about the third column that I have developed in terms of how to understand mind-body issues. The emotions column, as I've discussed, is more in line with how a lot of mind-body practitioners already practice. It's about although I have specific rules of thumb that are really just my own, from my own observation and developing this, but understanding that what we feel emotionally can translate into the body. That's the emotions column. The doubt column is the first new thing that I felt I developed more. As we noted in episode 4, this was when I went to Eric Sherman and I had all these questions for him, and it was afterwards that I realized how key that was. And so that's what became the doubt column. The power column, though, that came a bit later. When I was first starting to work with mind-body cases, I was always thinking about emotions versus doubt, and we were toggling between the two as we were looking for things. And then what I found is, wait a minute, there's this other constellation. And what that constellation is your relationship with yourself. So this is how I describe the power column. It is about your relationship with yourself and a number of factors. And I actually just had a session today where we were talking about this lovely woman from Wisconsin. Us two Midwesterners, we really connected, and we're goodists, and we're talking about all the usual stuff that we do to take care of people and things like that. But we were talking about the power column, and she was like, the thing is, I don't know, I don't want to stop being good to people. I don't know. Do I want to be powerful? She said, I do want to be powerful, but I think she was struggling with the idea of becoming powerful. And one of the reasons that I think she was struggling with it, and this often is the case, is there's more to explain about that. It's not about becoming powerful in your external life. You can do that if you want, but you don't even have to. You don't have to change anything outside of yourself. It's about your relationship inside. And so what I help people to do is to start to pay attention when they do not feel powerful in a given moment. It doesn't mean they have to make a different choice outside, but to recognize when you don't feel powerful and start to develop some strategies for how you can kind of get back into power with yourself.
And how do they do that with you? Do they sit with you and talk it out, or is this something that they're doing? Explain that a little bit.
Great question, and I will do my best to answer it, but this is probably a longer conversation. So at first it's a conversation. Just as with the emotions column, do you remember how I would try to help them articulate the very specific themes? And with doubt, I would help them try to articulate all their questions. Well, here I'm trying to help them articulate their different power dynamics. There are people who come to see me and they're like, oh yeah, I don't feel super powerful and I would love to. And that's a very different pathway that we would take with that column than people who say, oh, I could never be powerful. No.
But are they talking about their external feeling of power, or is it like, how would you describe to someone how they're viewing their internal observation of how they feel?
Yeah, I usually have to get this more concrete for people, which is exactly what's happening here. It was a parallel process. So
it means it's a tricky subject.
Yeah, well, and a lot of times people don't realize when they're not like in power. So if you, let's say you walk into a new job, and actually I have a patient, whenever he has a new job, he freaks out. We call it short circuiting. He comes in and he knows he doesn't feel powerful, but he didn't know it in that language. He just knew it felt bad. And so a lot of times what I'm doing is I'm putting words to a bad feeling.
Got it.
They know they feel bad, but they don't know why. And what I have found is that a lot of the times when we're exploring the power column, it's because you're undercutting yourself in some way, or
self-sabotaging that part.
Not even necessarily in behavior, but just in feeling. I mean, when I first went on The Raw Word, the talk show that I was on, I was telling myself all kinds of things without even realizing it. Things like, I don't belong here. Oh my God, they're going to see right through me. And I know you had a somewhat similar experience on this show at first.
Right. Yeah.
Remember after the first episode? And
oh my gosh.
I was like, wow, she did great. And you were like, oh my God. So
yes. It's comforting to hear that, when other people have those experiences, because it feels so intense.
I still have it. Even now, I could have it. In certain segments, I can feel powerful. I can feel that what I have to offer is good. And then at other times, Maybe I got rattled earlier in the day, and I come in and I'm thinking, I don't know, am I that good? Or is this going to help people? So your self-talk, how you're relating to yourself, that's the power column. And when you're feeling bad in some way, sure, we can look at emotions and see, did one of those themes pop up that's making you feel bad? But usually that's going to translate right into the body. The thing about the power column is we don't often feel these things in the body, not the power column. We feel this in our emotional life. That's not true. We actually do experience them in the body, but they have a different way of manifesting. Essentially, the power column is like a broad picture of the person, how they're relating to themselves, but it is also how they're relating to other people. So you can be in situations where, and it can be anything. You could be ordering a sandwich. You could be getting a haircut. And you could be like, am I feeling powerful right now or not? If you're feeling nervous or anxious, that's not a powerful feeling.
Would some people call that feeling being in control? Like, do I feel in control right now? Or do I feel out of control?
That's a very interesting question. I think some people would characterize it that way. I think, though, it's a little different. I think that people who are feeling in control can actually not feel powerful at the same time. They're related, but they're different. You could have somebody who feels in control, but not powerful. Here's a great example. We were just talking about parenting earlier. Parents can like rule with an iron fist, and then they're in control, quote unquote. Power is about whether you feel in control, not whether you are. But maybe that's what you were talking about. This happens a lot to us, where we're actually saying the same thing. But
I don't. I'm just wondering if it's semantics, or if it's really, if there really is something from your perspective that is, very different.
Well, first of all, everything is semantics here. my word power. We've talked about this. Some people need to change that word. They're like, I don't, that's not appealing to me. I don't want it. Remember the woman who wanted to have it be called strength? Or some people
I would be with her.
Confidence.
I like the word strength over power. For some reason, power makes me feel like there's a dominance over something, and strength is something that, and especially I think, I like the feel of that word better.
Well, and that's one thing I work with people on. So if I was working with you on this, I'd say, okay, we'll go with strength. That's fine. For me, power helps with something, though. And this is the thing. Different words are going to help different people. Power was the one that helped me, and so I'm biased towards it. But for a lot of people, they'll have the response you did. For me, the reason I like power is it is giving me permission to do something I didn't feel I could do. So it's really about unlocking whatever the struggle within that person is. So for me, it was about being powerful. I knew that I was powerful, but I wasn't allowed to be powerful within myself. For other people, it brings up other connotations, and we change the words, but the meaning is the same, which is altering. It's altering your sense of self to a positive standpoint.
It's kind of unlocking. It's unlocking, a door that kind of opens up into a lot more freedom, right? Is that kind of
that is
what
exactly
you're saying?
It.
Yeah.
Yep, and that's why I found this column to be such an important addition, because you can look at emotions and you can look at doubt, but if you're not looking at where you're locked up in your own process with yourself, a lot of times we would go between emotions and doubt, but we weren't getting there. So when it comes to a lot of people talk about plateaus, where they get better to a certain point and then they get stuck. If you are stuck on a plateau, the chances are pretty good that this is a power issue. There's something broader in your relationship with yourself that's keeping you from breaking through to that next level.
That's
really how I developed.
I can see that for sure.
Yeah, that's how I developed the power column. Is I kept working with people who had plateaus, and I thought back to my own plateaus, and I was like, oh, this was about my relationship with myself and my relationship with my symptoms, for that matter, or other people.
What's interesting about that too is I know a lot of people that work really hard on themselves. Like they go to every kind of alternative healing, general, medical practice kind of healing, but they do work and they journal and they go to every possible person that could help them explore, and they're open to it, and they learn all these things, and then they're like,
yeah,
okay, I know this. I'm very clear about all of the things that I have issues with. By the time you're midlife, you've pretty much, if you need to do that work, you do. But then there is also that plateau that you're talking about. And I'm just thinking in my head as you're talking about that, just, I really bet they have a big relationship disparity with that part of themselves.
I think so. I mean, some of the top experts in terms of just knowing the most about this are patients. They're not the experts, but they have studied this for years because they're trying to get better. And they get very frustrated as a lot of, actually, one of the questions that we were going to answer today, I'm going to jump right to it because it flows right here. So I was working with a guy, I'm working with a guy now, and he was thinking about all the different treatments that are out there, all the different ideas. How am I going to sort this out? And he felt that he was very drawn to me for a particular reason, which I'll get into in a second. But he said to me this week, is this just going to be another 5 years of therapy? And first of all, I could totally identify with that. I've been in some therapies that went on much longer than they needed to because they were kind of allowing themselves and me too much space to just explore and explore and explore. And I love therapy. I think it can be great. But the reason he was drawn to me in the first place is that I talk about a more systematic plan. But my systematic plan is not generalized. Well, it is and it isn't. I can present a generalized plan, but then I'm encouraging people, you have to make it specific to you. So I said to him, no. First of all, a lot of what I do with these short-term consultations is not really therapy. It's giving information. So I said, I'm instead of being like Eric Sherman is a mind-body informed therapist. Now, I do happen to be a therapist, but I think of myself more as a therapy-informed mind-body expert. My focus is on the mind-body stuff, whereas Eric's is, I think, more on, I don't want to speak for him, although apparently I am. Here we go. Sorry, Eric. But I was telling this guy, listen, you don't have to do everything. You pick what works for you because it's your mind. And we need to work with your mind. So we went back to all the things that worked, and he was like, so you mean like it was working, but then it didn't work in this situation, doesn't mean I should throw it out? And I was like, no, keep it, but then adjust. Let's make a new part of your program that gets to what happens when this happens. So he was working with kind of clearing out his mind, and that was very relaxing and good for him. But then he freaked out at one point, and it didn't work anymore. And so he thought, well, there goes that. So don't throw out things that work. We just need to broaden we need to broaden your program, the program you have with you. And that gets back to the power column. You've got a relationship with yourself. Most people don't even know to kind of think about that so much.
Yeah. And just to be able to adjust or pivot or, make those adjustments, especially, I mean, right now, suddenly we're in this pandemic and people have had to majorly look at themselves and what they need and what kind of control that they don't have anymore over areas of their life that they felt very secure in. Which shake the foundation a little bit. I mean, I don't know about you, but, right when this happened for the first few months, there was, almost the stages of grief and denial and acceptance and all of those things that everyone was experiencing, just, and then having to to adjust again. And I feel like everything is about adjustment. If you can't adjust,
Well,
then there's bigger problems going on.
Yeah, well, you talk about that there's a seasonal adjustment that goes on. I want to hear more about that at some point. But I agree with you entirely about adjusting. The thing that I like about my setup with me, and I have these action steps that are ways of thinking that are helpful for me, is they're helpful. One is helpful in this situation, another is helpful in this situation. So actually this brings me to the other question I was going to talk about, another question that came from my work this week. I was talking with somebody who we have successfully, I don't want to say we because that's me taking too much credit. She has successfully reduced her headaches during the day. But at night, she keeps having them. And she's saying why. And I can't say that I definitively know why anything a lot of the time. But when I was talking with her, my theory was, well, wait, and I'm kind of like a detective. There's clues.
Yeah.
So the fact that she doesn't have symptoms. I do the
same thing with clients. There's a whole litany of things that are leading to the answer.
Sherlock Holmes, my childhood hero. I ended up a detective after all. So the fact that she's not having symptoms during the day but is at night, it's a clue about something. And a lot of times these clues are leading us right down a pretty clear path. Something's bothering her about night. I mean, so that's the first clue. So I was talking to her about it. And one of the things that we came up with, I don't know if we're right about it yet, but I think that we are, is that, first of all, people have a lot more fear at night. They just do. It calls to mind darkness. It calls to mind mortality. It calls to mind isolation and separation. Night can be great, and I'm a night owl.
Well, and it's also asleep. It's also a time of reflection, and a lot of people don't like to do that because they don't want to see what's there. And the step I would take even further from that experience is to ask, are the headaches moving around, or are they very stable? Because those are very, very telling signs in the Ayurvedic practice of, again, another mystery, clue of the dynamic of the headache, because there are very many different kinds. But it is interesting because the stillness, when people get quiet with themselves, if they allow themselves to, it can be very scary, and it can be also, noticing that there's an avoidance going on, especially when we don't crash the second our head hits the pillow.
It's really interesting because, I think insomnia, you could think of it as being afraid to be still with yourself.
That is one of our number one problems as a species in the modern 2020, because you ask if you find a room of people, and I've been in many rooms with thousands of people, and you ask them to be still, if you want to see panic, if we're going to be quiet for how long? For 20 minutes. People will go out of their mind. 5 minutes. In my experience, people can sit for about, it used to be 10 minutes before I'd see fidgeting. And I'm telling you, in the last 5 years, it's about 5 minutes before.
Well, with smartphones, it's probably like a minute and a half.
Yeah, it's really, it's tough.
So let me tell you, though, what happened with this one woman, because I think we are headed for a good breakthrough with this. The other thing that happens when people are going to sleep is they're losing their intellectual self. They're entering the territory where their emotional self is a little bit more in charge, because they don't have their conscious mind on if they're asleep. So what we were talking about is, okay, so maybe your intellectual side that you use to kind of control these things isn't available to you. And what it means is, like with the other guy I'm talking about, we need to adapt. We need to make another part of your program. So the thing that we developed was, okay, let's have you focus on the power column, actually. And when we talked about her power column, it was about the fact that, or this particular issue seemed to be about the fact that Her intellect was where she drew her power. She did not have a sense of power just within herself. This is actually right in line with what you were saying about control.
Yep.
She was able to feel in control in lots of situations, but she was not able to feel so in control when the intellect wasn't there. And so I was saying to her, hey, maybe you can trust your own process. Maybe you can trust the process of your own mind and let go more. Well, you can let go more if you can trust that process. And she was like, well, but how's that going to work? And I was saying, listen, all you have to do is think about your power column before you go to sleep, and the process will already be going. People get very relieved about the idea they don't have to do everything. They don't have to do all of the programs. They don't. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say what you're saying about the intellect, what this woman will experience when she is able to do that is such a sense of, and you know this because you've seen it, but it is such a new world and a new trust and a feeling of just pure awareness that is at the subtlest level what it is to be alive. And so many people don't ever touch that in their whole life. And good for her for doing the work to try and do it, because it's really, I mean, anyone can try it. You can just sit and try to get to know that silence and that stillness and push past just the discomfort of whatever that fear is. So,
well, let me just tie it together a little bit with something I was thinking about, which is that, I mean, this fits with the power column, and we'll wrap up on this, but the power column is about sitting with yourself. It's much easier to sit quietly with yourself if you feel powerful. And what I mean by powerful is, do you feel powerful with you? Or maybe do you feel powerful in relation to other people? Or do you feel powerful in relation to your symptoms? So this is a very broad topic that requires a lot of discussion. People usually have most confusion of any of the columns on power. So totally
now we'll sit. Why don't we end with a 5-minute sit in meditation?
I'm sure our producer, Greg, will love that extra footage of 5 minutes. So we're going to wrap up here, and afterwards, Julie and I are going to sit here in silence for 5 minutes. Thank you for watching, everybody. Please click subscribe, hit like, and ring the bell for notifications on YouTube. Sign up for our newsletter on crushingdoubt.org for information on new episodes or to sign up for my live seminars.
You can find us on all social media platforms at Crushing Doubt. For questions you would like answered, please email info@crushingdoubt.org. And to keep our podcast going, please consider a donation on Venmo at Crushing Doubt.
I am here to help you resolve your doubts on your journey and find powerful, peaceful, and happy living.